Starting off at number 10, we have the Russian kindergartner. Now, this story surrounds a girl who was Russian in her past life. Her mother claims that when her daughter was learning the alphabet, she kept mixing up her letters. She would mix up her B's and V's and H's and N's. These letters aren't that similar, so it left her and her teacher confused, especially since her daughter kept saying, "I don't remember those." This little girl then states that she remembers the letter H and that it makes an N sound. Then she said that she knew more letters and began to write out the Russian alphabet. Her mom asked her where she learned that, and she said, "Vlad taught me before he disappeared," and not Vlad the vampire. This little girl claimed that Vlad was her brother in her past life. How freaky! Like, there's no way that this young girl just happened to know the Russian alphabet, unless it was from her past life. At number 9, we have the daughter who just wants to go home. This mother claims that when her daughter was young, she kept begging her mom to take her home. When she asked where her home was, she said that she used to live near the water with her other family. That was until one day she passed away. She would even draw pictures of her past home and retell memories of her watching the waves. She also refers to her mom as Pa and wants to go back home to her other Mahi. Moving on to number 8, we have The Boy and the Scottish Pub. Just like the title suggests, this story takes place in a pub in Scotland. When a 4-year-old and his family stopped at a pub in a small village in Cairngorms, the little boy recognized the pub immediately and said, "My favorite place." The boy was able to direct his dad to the bathroom in the pub, which was said to be hidden behind a wall and not even labeled. Then the little boy kept saying how much he loved this pub and sitting beside the fire. But there was no fireplace, but the boy insisted that there used to be one against a certain wall. Then he continued to talk about more details of the pub and about the owner and his friend Fred. Bar staff then said that his claims were correct. Fred was the owner there, but passed away 10 years ago. Okay, wow. Either this kid has been sneaking out and partying it up at this pub, or he truly did go there in his past life. Moving on to number 7, we have the boy who is his own grandfather. Yeah, you heard me correctly. This boy claims to be the reincarnation of his grandfather. A year before Gus Taylor was born, his grandfather had passed away. However, when the baby was 18 months, he started referring to himself as his own grandfather, Grandpa Augie. When he was 4, he could point out his grandpa in photographs despite never even seeing him before. Gus would also talk about his sister. Now, the grandfather's sister had been murdered and they always kept that from Gus, but somehow he already knew this detail and would continuously talk about his past sister. Creepy. And also super confusing. So the grandfather was the dad to Gus's mom, but his mom gave birth to her dad, the grandfather? That's so weird. Next up at number 6, we have Cameron McCauley. Now, there is a short little documentary on Cameron in case you are wondering and want to check it out as well. So basically, when Cameron was 2 years old, he kept saying that he had another life on a remote island called Barra. Now, Cameron was from Glasgow, but Barra is an hour flight away, approximately 220 miles from Glasgow. For 3 years, Cameron kept talking about his family in Barra. He said he had brothers and sisters and even had a black and white sheepdog. He said he remembers living in a white house near the beach and remembers planes landing nearby. He even remembers the view outside from his house's window. Cameron began missing his family so much that he would become super upset. That's when they ended up going to Barra to find his home. When they did find his home, it had the same view that Cameron described and was apparently even home to the same dog. However, Cameron said he had a father named Shane Robertson that passed away from getting hit in a car. This is the one thing that doesn't check out. Apparently there was never a Shane Robertson that lived there, so who's Shane? Honestly, maybe it was his father from like 2 lives ago. Who even knows? We are now at our halfway mark with Shanti Devi. Shanti Devi was born in 1926 in India. When she was 4 years old, she started making claims about her real name, her other family, and her past life. Apparently, she told her parents that she lived 145 kilometers away in a place called Mathura with her husband Kedar Nath. She also said that she died after giving birth to her child. Apparently, she even had the same talking habits as someone from Mathura. Her family eventually took her to the other village and found the man she claimed to be her husband by the name of Kedar Nath. Kedar then told them that he did lose his wife 9 years ago, 10 days after delivering their son. Now, Kedar was skeptical of this girl's claims, so when he went to go meet Shanti, he pretended to just be his brother. But Shanti instantly recognized him as her husband from her past life. Next on my list at number 4, we have James Leyanger. Born in 1998, when James was 2, he claimed to be a lieutenant and passed away when his plane was shot down. Now, just like any other parent would do, they just brushed it aside, saying that he had a wild imagination. But then he kept describing accurate information. When they researched into this plane crash, they found that there was an American pilot named Lieutenant James Houston Jr. who passed away in 1945 towards the end of World War II. First off, what are the odds that he gets reincarnated and his parents literally picked the same name? Now, the boy continued to talk about his ship, the Natoma, which was also true. He would also have reoccurring nightmares about an airplane crash. His parents then met Lieutenant James's crew, who are all old by now, but they confirmed the details that James mentioned, saying that they were all accurate and only the lieutenant and the crew could have known some of the details. Coming in at number 3, we have Edward Austrian. Edward Austrian was 4 years old when he claimed that he was a soldier from World War I. He kept saying that he passed away after taking a bullet to the throat. In fact, Edward continuously would get sore throats and would say that his shot wound was hurting. Doctors couldn't even explain why he was constantly getting these sore throats, and in fact he even developed a cyst in his throat at one point. Eventually the cyst mysteriously went away on its own after Edward started talking more about his past life. He claims that he was a soldier named James that was 18 years old. He has vivid memories from his past life that he would share with his family. One day he said, and I quote, "We were walking along through the mud. It was damp, it was cold. My rifle is heavy. I remember looking out and seeing trees, and then there was desolation. I heard a shot come from behind. It went through someone else, hit me square in the back of the neck, and I felt my throat fill with blood." There's no way a 4-year-old could have made up those details, especially since his parents claim that they've never let him watch any soldier or war-related movies or shows. Next up at number 2, we have the boy from Thailand. Chennai was 3 years old when he started having memories of his past life. This 3-year-old boy remembers being a teacher named Bua Kai. He talked about his previous family, wife, and children. He said that he passed away after being shot in the head while walking to school. What's freaky is that this boy has 2 birthmarks on his face. One on the back of his head and one above his left eye. Those are the exact spots where the bullet entered and exited Buakai's head. Now, people believe that birthmarks tell some sort of story from our past lives. In this case, it symbolizes how he was killed in his past. Now, Buakai was a real person that passed away about 5 years before Chennai was born. Coming in at number 1, we have the boy who solved his own murder. When a boy in Syria Golan Heights was 3, he began saying that he had been murdered in his past life. The boy said that he was killed by getting an axe to his head. This boy even had a long red birthmark on his head. In this boy's case, the birthmark also showed the way that he passed away. Now, it turns out that this boy's story checked out. They took him to the village that he said he once lived in, and even showed his family where his body was buried. When they unearthed his body, they found a boy's skeleton with an axe wound in the skeleton's skull. Like, there's no way that a kid could have just known where a body was buried by coincidence. But it doesn't stop there. The kid also remembered who the killer was and his full name. They then confronted him and he eventually admitted to the crime.
Coming in at number 10 now, we have the 98 Rock. At the start of World War II, Japan captured 98 American soldiers on a small Pacific island. The US struck back in an attempt to free the soldiers. Japan knew they were going to lose the battle, and so they decided to kill the 98 soldiers instead of letting them go free. One of the soldiers managed to escape and hide. In his last moments, he found a rock on the beach and carved 98 US prisoners of war 1934 and the day's date. When he was found, the Japanese admiral beheaded him personally. However, his message made sure the 98 were never forgotten by the people who found it. Next up at number 9 now, we have the message in a bottle. In 2016, a demolition crew in New Mexico found a time capsule from 1968. It was a bottle containing letters written by kids. A lot of it was normal stuff about their favorite TV shows at the time, but one message stood out as pretty creepy. It was written by a boy who said he was called Greg Lee Youngman. It read, "I am dead. I go to Montgomery School. This is the olden school name. I was born in 1900. You auto, now I dead. My favorite subject is spooking the police. I play the guitar. In case you don't know what it is a board with strings on them. I am 10 years old. See you later, savages." What did you guys make of that? Was it the ghost of a 10-year-old boy who liked to scare police, or was it just some kid being a real savage? Really weird either way. Next up at number 8, we have the Nazi time capsule. In 2016, archaeologists in Poland found a time capsule from Hitler's Third Reich. It was buried by the Nazis in 1934 before the Second World War started. They wanted it to be dug up in the distant future by people living in a utopian Nazi world. Obviously, that didn't happen, which makes the contents of the time capsule that much more chilling. Inside there were newspapers, 2 copies of Hitler's Mein Kampf, documents from Nazi Germany, and a letter to future generations. The contents were put in a Polish museum and are now a scary reminder of what could have been. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Voynich manuscript. This is easily one of the most mysterious things in human history. It's a codex that has been carbon dated to the 15th century. It contains hundreds of pages of illustrations and diagrams of plants, people, and astronomical images, but here's the strange thing. Every page contains text written in an unknown language. It's been over 100 years now since it surfaced, and in that time, every genius codebreaker and linguistic expert in the world has tried to decipher what the words say, and they have all failed. The pictures seem to show that it's a complex analysis of life and the universe, but who wrote it? If they had a language, surely they couldn't have been the only one of their kind. What do you guys think of this mystery? Coming in at number 6 now, we have the Emerald Tablet. This is an incredible mystery because it doesn't actually exist anymore. It was said to be like the Philosopher's Stone, containing the key to turning any metal into pure gold. It was mentioned in an Arabic book around the 7th century, it was then translated into Latin in the 12th century, and even Isaac Newton himself made a copy of it. The problem is, the text from the Emerald Tablet reads more like a list of 14 riddles. Many people have tried to decode its secrets, and all have failed. Alright, moving on to the number 5 spot now, we have the Nazca lines. These huge 1,000-foot geoglyphs in southern Peru depict animals such as birds, fish, llamas, monkeys, and even humans, but only from above. They weren't properly documented until pilots spotted them in the early 1900s. The thing is though, they were made about 2,000 years ago, long before the invention of flying. Some researchers have said there was no way they could have been made unless you could see them from above. So, if they couldn't fly back then, how did they make the lines, or more importantly, who or what were they for? Coming in at number 4 now, we have the glowing rocks. Hendra Down is a collection of Neolithic age stones put together in England about 5,000 years ago. That's a couple of thousand years older than Stonehenge. In 2016, scientists made an incredible discovery. There were markings on the stone that could only be seen at night. They first realized this when the symbols appeared from a camera flash. Then they realized the stones around the area contained quartz, which glows in the dark when it's smashed together with another piece of quartz. The researchers knew that the people who built this associated darkness with the supernatural and strange pagan rituals, but that's about everything they know. Who the messages were for and what they meant remains shrouded in the mystery of time. Okay, coming in at the number 3 spot now, we have the Codex Gigas. This early 12th century book is also known as the Devil's Bible. It's almost 9 inches thick and weighs 165 pounds. It was said to have been written by a monk who had been locked up for breaking his vows. He promised that if the monastery let him live, he would write them a book that would contain all of human knowledge. Legend says he did this by selling his soul to the devil. The book contains the whole of the Bible, as well as copies of other historical texts. It contains 310 pages in total, even a drawing of the devil, but it's missing 12 pages. Some say these missing pages contain satanic text to conjure the devil himself. Okay, next up at number 2 now, we have the photograph. In 2014, Reddit user Mariah KL13 shared with everyone a creepy bottle she found on a California beach. It looked more like a jar and was filled with bright pink water. She emptied out the strange liquid and saw a piece of paper wrapped up neatly with a black ribbon. She opened the jar and unfolded the paper. It was a washed out photograph of a woman with a bunch of needles sticking out of them. Reddit users went crazy with theories on this. Was it made by a murderer? Was it a curse? How long had it been just drifting in the ocean for? The creepy contents left more questions than answers. And finally at number 1 now, we have the text message. This one doesn't come from the distant past, but it creeped out a lot of people. In early 2017, Reddit users started sharing stories about how they were getting texts from unknown numbers. That wasn't too strange, that happens every day. What was really strange was the texts were coming from the year 2003. The numbers always seemed to start with 19. Quite often the text would just be completely blank, but sometimes they would contain random characters, such as this one that just said !S. Now the official explanation for all of this was that it was just a technical glitch. Others said it was people from the past trying to contact their future selves. I honestly have no idea. Either way, I know I would freak out if I got a text from an unknown number in the past. What about you guys? Alright, starting off the video now, I'm going to talk about Greg Wilkinson's letter. In July 2017, a strange letter was found in a bathroom wall in a house in Sydney, Australia. It was written by a man called Greg Wilkinson, and it contained some disturbing predictions about the year 2060. That wasn't the only thing though. The letter also explained who Greg was, and that he wrote the letter on the 15th of April 1995. He enclosed a picture of he and his wife on their wedding day and explained how they met. He listed the cost of everyday items there, such as bread and milk. He said that the internet was the hot new thing and that it was currently exploding. Greg even included some information on current technology. He said he was writing the letter on Microsoft Word on a laptop with 8 megabytes of RAM. Greg described that as pretty high end at the time. It does seem quite strange looking back at that because the average smartphone these days is like hundreds of times more powerful than that. The letter begins to take a darker tone though as Greg talks about current generational trends. He said that AIDS is killing thousands of people and that it's decimating poorer countries. Deaths due to AIDS peaked in the mid-90s in the US but have been falling ever since. This morbid tone continues though when Greg moved on to the predictions for the future. Firstly, he states that his wife thinks the letter will be discovered in the year 2020, but Greg thinks it will be closer to 2060. The letter was found in 2017, and so it seems like his wife was almost spot on. Greg went on to say that he believes there will be an ideological problem with Islam that will plunge parts of the world into what he called a global war that could go on forever. Some people said this was a chilling prediction of jihadism in the decades since the letter was written. Others have said that's wrong and that it's an unfair characterization, and the prediction has sparked a lot of debate online. Greg also accurately predicted that China would become a world economic superpower. This may seem very obvious to us now, but at the time it was still up for debate as to whether China would be able to handle its own growth. At the end of the letter, Greg apologized to those of us reading in the future if his predictions seemed quite bleak. When the story went viral on Facebook, many users were impressed with his predictions and some even asked for the upcoming lottery numbers. Nice try. Moving on now, we have the Nazi capsule. This is one that I touched on in a previous video, but now I have the chance to go into a lot more detail here, and the details are quite disturbing. In 2016, a time capsule buried by the Nazis in 1934 was found in Poland. Archaeologists had known about the capsule's existence for a number of years, but it was buried under thick concrete. The Nazis had buried it there over 80 years before during the construction of the Ordensburg Crossing Sea building, which was used to train officers of the Nazi Party. It took professional miners to break through the concrete, and even then they had to wade through large amounts of groundwater that had pooled up over the years. Once it was on the surface though, the eager historians opened it up. What they found was both surprising and not really surprising in equal measure. There were a number of photographs, including some images of Adolf Hitler. There were newspapers along with 2 copies of Mein Kampf written by Hitler himself. One of the researchers described the contents of the time capsule capsule as perfectly preserved. The construction of that camp began on April 22nd, 1934. It was made with huge granite foundations and cost 20 million Reichsmarks to construct. It was an important place for the Nazis. They wanted it to be an educational center to train the next generation of Nazi cadets. It had strict requirements on who could be admitted. They had to be at least 5'4", between 23 and 26 years old. They also had to be racially pure. I'm not sure what that means, but it's the Nazis, so we can guess that it would be a pretty horrific thing. They had to be in good health and have no physical limitations. Their classes would include studies of politics, world history and philosophy. They would also be taught battle tactics, military drills and sports. The camp eventually went on to become a base for the Hitler Youth. The more details you learn about the camp, the more creepy this time capsule really becomes. Moving on now, we have Einstein's letter. In 1939, Albert Einstein contributed a letter that he wrote to the World's Fair time capsule. The time capsule is intended to be open in the year 6939, exactly 5,000 years after it was buried. The time capsule was called Time Capsule 1. In 1964, when the World's Fair returned to the same site in New York, a second time capsule called Time Capsule 2 was buried just 10 feet north of the first one. Along with Einstein's letter, Time Capsule 1 contained 35 small everyday items. These included a fountain pen and an alphabet block set. There were also 75 types of fabrics, metals, plastics and seeds. A small microfilm contained literature, art and news events of the early 20th century. These came to over 10 million words and 1,000 pictures. They even included instructions on how to make a large microfilm viewer and a motion picture projector to view the newsreels on there. There were copies of Life magazine, a Kewpie doll, $1 in change and even a pack of Camel cigarettes. The seeds in glass tubes were of wheat, corn, oats, tobacco, cotton, flax, rice, soybeans, alfalfa, sugar beets, carrots and barley. Enough of all that though, let's talk about Einstein's letter. In the years since all this, the world has come to respect Einstein as perhaps one of the most intelligent people to ever walk the earth, and someone who seemed to have a great insight into the unknown. That's why people found his letter that described the brutality of war and its place in human nature as quite disturbing. It read as follows: "Our time is rich in inventive minds, the inventions of which could facilitate our lives considerably. We are crossing the seas by power and utilizing power also in order to relieve humanity from all tiring muscular work. We have learned to fly and we are able to send messages and news without any difficulty over the entire world through electric waves. However, the production and distribution of commodities is entirely unorganized so that everybody must live in fear of being eliminated from the economic cycle. In this way, suffering for the want of everything. Furthermore, people living in different countries kill each other at irregular time intervals, so that also for this reason anyone who thinks about the future must live in fear and terror. This is due to the fact that the intelligence and character of the masses are incomparably lower than the intelligence and character of the few who produce something valuable for the community. I trust that posterity will read these statements with a feeling of proud and justified superiority." Moving on now, we have Dante's time capsule. This story comes from a user on Imgur who said that one day his grandmother invited him over to her house to help her sort through some old stuff. Inside a safe in her ceramics room, he discovered a time capsule that even she didn't know was there. He found the safe while clearing out a cupboard and noticed that it had a false bottom to it. The fact that his grandma had no clue what was in there was exciting. It meant that its contents had been lost in time. They were about to discover something really big. Unfortunately though, his grandmother didn't know the combination to open the safe. After some deliberation, she gave him permission to open it by any means necessary. So they took it outside and they pried it open with a chisel. Inside the box, they quickly realized that the capsule had been put together by one of their own family members. It wasn't the grandmother's parents, but the grandmother's grandmother who had made the time capsule. That meant it was at least 4 generations old. Inside they found a message that read, "Abandon all regret, ye who enter here." Now this is a slight change from the famous line in Dante's The Divine Comedy, which reads, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." They weren't sure why their relative had swapped the words regret and hope. The poem that it's quoting describes a journey through hell, purgatory and heaven. They weren't put off by this slightly dark overtone though and continued to search through the time capsule. They found a black silk bag with Chinese calligraphy on the outside. They translated it to find that it meant double happiness. They opened the bag, which contained an assortment of items, including a pen, a plastic box, a suede pouch, and even an oil lamp. Then they found pictures of his great-grandfather and his great-great-grandmother. Inside the suede pouch was a nice old pocket watch and a bunch of stamps from every corner of the world. The plastic box contained coins that were also from pretty much anywhere you can think of. Some of the countries don't even exist anymore. The final item that they discovered was a single solitary key. There was no note or clue as to what this key was for. It was a total mystery, but mystery was what this time capsule was all about. Perhaps one day someone will figure out what the strange warning on the paper meant and what exactly this key can unlock, but for now the answers are lost in time.